Night had fallen, and the faint yellow lights of the hospital flickered weakly in the thick darkness. Henry, a young surgeon, had received an invitation to work at this hospital. It was an excellent opportunity, but something in the atmosphere made him uneasy. This hospital had a dark past that no one liked to mention, and things became even stranger when he was given a small notebook containing bizarre rules that he had to follow if he wanted to survive. Henry entered the clinic, where he was handed a clean doctor's uniform and a small notebook. As he opened the notebook, he began to read the harsh, cold words, full of mystery. These rules were not ordinary medical protocols that any doctor would be familiar with, but strange principles only meant for those working at this hospital. Rule 1, never look out the window if you hear crying. Rule 2, ensure all doors are tightly closed before 11 p.m. If you forget, there will be consequences. Rule 3, do not interact with patients at midnight, especially those who seem frail. They are more dangerous than you think. Henry furrowed his brow, feeling the oddness of this place. He knew he had to be cautious, but these rules were unsettling. Nevertheless, he decided not to think too much about it and started his work. Yet, the rules lingered in his mind, haunting him. On his first night at the hospital, when the clock struck 11 p.m., Henry heard strange sounds coming from the window. A faint cry echoed through the stillness of the hospital. He turned his head but reminded himself of Rule 1, never look out the window if you hear crying. His heart raced, but he tried to shake off the anxiety and continued his work. When he checked the clock, he recalled Rule 2. Ensure all doors are tightly closed before 11 p.m. Tran rushed to check all the doors in the hospital, from the clinic door to the operating room door. They all had to be securely locked. He took a deep breath, feeling reassured when he heard the click of the doors shutting tightly, but little did he know, the rules he thought were mere warnings were actually matters of life and death. At exactly 11:30 p.m., Henry received an alarm from his watch. He reread Rule 6 once more. At 11:30 p.m., go to the management office. If you see light coming from the operating room, immediately run to the bathroom on the 3rd floor and shut the door. You will hear knocking, but never open it. When the knocking stops, you will be safe. Henry felt his skin crawl. Why should he do these things? But he decided to follow the rules, thinking it would be safer. He quickly made his way to the management office, and suddenly, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned around, his heart pounding, but saw only the operating room door wide open, with dim light spilling out, without thinking any further. Henry rushed to the 3rd floor. He heard his own heavy breathing mingling with the footsteps echoing behind him. He stumbled on a step but quickly got back on his feet and continued running. Suddenly, he saw the shadow of a strange creature, its face wrinkled, maggots falling from its mouth, and its eyes hollow and soulless. It was a creature Henry had never seen before, and it was getting closer. He dashed into the bathroom and slammed the door shut. The pounding on the door made Henry nearly faint from fear. But gradually, the knocking softened and eventually stopped. He sighed in relief, though his nerves remained on edge. When Henry stepped out of the bathroom, he recalled Rule 8, if you hear a beep from the X-ray room, you must immediately wear radiation protection. Be careful with patients affected by radiation, as they can carry a deadly danger. Henry hurried to the X-ray room. The beeping echoed continuously in the empty room, but he couldn't find any radiation protection gear. Things became even worse when he saw a frail patient lying on a bed. He remembered Rule 9, a patient will arrive at midnight, avoid them as they carry a dangerous disease that is highly contagious. Henry decided not to intervene, only watching the patient in fearful silence, but as he turned to leave, something strange happened. The patient began to move. His bony fingers stretched out, and then he started speaking in unintelligible words. Henry felt trapped in a nightmare. By midnight, Henry realized that he was truly trapped in a loop of bizarre rules. He had followed each step, but each time he overcame one challenge, another one appeared. However, when the final rule came to pass, the thing Henry feared most happened. Henry went down to the basement, where there was a large metal door. He entered the code as dictated by the rules, 224-3233. The door opened, and he entered a secret lab. Strange creatures were trapped in glass tanks. He peered into the microscopes and saw infected tissue samples developing into grotesque forms. He couldn't believe his eyes when he saw rats injected with drugs turning into monstrous beings with spider legs and human heads. In that moment, he realized he had become part of the nightmare. His body began to wither, his skin peeling off, and he collapsed onto the floor. In pain, he discovered a box of medicine. The label read, "Cures radiation sickness." He opened the box and took the pill. His hands shook as he brought the pill to his mouth. But just before he could swallow it, he saw a huge shadow, a black, monstrous creature, approaching. He couldn't swallow the pill, as his heart stopped beating. Everything started to fade, and he realized, this is not real. Henry woke up in a cold sweat, feeling disoriented. He opened his eyes and looked around. He was in a nightmare. But the moment he entered the hospital the next morning, the clock on the desk struck exactly 11 p.m. This time, Henry knew there was no escape.